Listen, no matter what I tell you about how just wild Nathan Fielder's comedy is and how absurdist and out of the box he is as a comedian, nothing can really prepare you for season 2 of The Rehearsal. That season is halfway through. I found myself yelling at my TV yesterday. The group chat's here. We have a lot to talk about. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Nathan Fielder is really in a league of his own here. He's making the most outrageous experimental comedy on TV right now. The third episode of The Rehearsal, season 2, aired last night. And the premise of this whole show is like, what if you could rehearse the most difficult, the most awkward conversations that you have to have, but in a realistic setting? How would that change you? What could you possibly learn from that experience? And just to set the scene here, I want you guys to take a listen to this scene. It's a scene from the show that I think perfectly captures just what people love about Nathan Fielder's work. This is a guy who's desperately seeking connection with people, but can't quite figure out the mechanics of making a friend.
Okay, or her aura. How do you change that?
You know, I don't know if that's, you can really control like what your natural energy is, you know?
Even though it was hard to hear, I disagreed with this man. I believe that any human quality can be learned, or at least emulated.
That is a bit of the second season of The Rehearsal. I don't know how he does it, man, but Nathan's approach to comedy, it holds on to the absurd, somehow makes it more absurd, but at the same time, it just has this entire weaving and webbing of tenderness in there, and it's quite an incredible thing to see. Amil Niazi's here, Adam Nayman is here, and Angelo Muredda is here, and we're all here to talk about The Rehearsal. Hello to all of you. Welcome to the show.
Morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Listen, Amil, I'm going to start with you because you've been following the thread of Nathan Fielder's career for a minute. He's kind of at the height of his work at the moment. Tell me a little bit about what can you describe about the language that he's been building over the past decade or so?
Yeah, you know, somehow inexplicably, I've been following his career since he was making, you know, goofy internet videos. But I think that the person that we have today, certainly in this last episode of The Rehearsal that we just saw, has been building since his time on This Hour Has 22 Minutes doing Nathan on Your Side, where he kind of takes his learnings from business school. I'm being very generous saying business school. And applies them to local businesses. And then the show that I think more people know him from, Nathan For You, was sort of built off of that character that he established on 22 Minutes. And all of this has seemingly been about kind of, you know, helping sort of awkward business people figure out where they've gone wrong. And of course, if you have been paying attention, it's ultimately really about Nathan and his interactions with humanity, with the human psyche, with his own inability to connect with people, and to enact a sort of sense of sincerity. And I think everything he does is so strategic and so thought out and so rehearsed, that you really can go back and look at someone who's been building a library based on this one character for so long. And that is very, very hard to do, especially in comedy.
Is there an example that comes to mind for you about how he walks this line between parody and sincerity? Because like it's a difficult walk for any comedian, but also to do it for this long, that's quite something. So is there an example that comes to mind for you, Emil?
Well, you know, when you think about the Nathan For You persona and what he did with that show, that of course, Dumb Starbucks is one of the things he did. The Summit Ice that just came back up in The Rehearsal. But for me, my thinking around him really changed when I watched the episode The Claw of Shame, where he did this stunt where basically he had to get out of handcuffs fast enough before he exposed himself to a group of children. And there was a sheriff standing by where if he did that, then he would be on the sex offender registry. And just all of that sounds so wacky, especially when you realize this is a show about helping business people. And here he is about to be, you know, exposing himself to children and added to the sex offender registry, and you're like, what is this guy thinking? But the way it all ties up, and the genuine suspense that you feel, and the genuine human connection you feel within that episode is just remarkable. And so for me, it's like episodes like the Claw of Shame, or like Sunday night's rehearsal episode, where you just go, I don't know if he's being sincere or not, but at this point it really doesn't matter, because what he's doing is so unique and interesting that I'm along for the ride no matter what.
The thread of his work really is just like taking this fabric of human connection and the ways that we communicate with each other or don't communicate with one another, and at times making it into a parody, and at sometimes sort of saying, no, I sincerely just want to learn what we're doing wrong here. And there's something really beautiful about it. And they're often these genuine moments that are really moving in Nathan's comedy. I want to play you guys a scene from Nathan for you. Just to set up real quick, Nathan is producing a play, but he doesn't think the romantic leads have a lot of chemistry. So he steps in for an acting exercise, and he asks the actress to look him in the eyes and say, I love you. Take a listen.
I love you.
Again.
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 You have tears in your eyes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You have tears in your eyes. Oh, really? I mean, like, it's I feel it excruciatingly in my body, and that was 24 seconds. The whole scene is a minute and a half. We decided to cut it down a little bit. Adam, what does that episode tell you about what Nathan Fielder does?
Well, that episode, Smokers Allowed, that's the primal scene for the rehearsal, where the 2 seasons of the rehearsal really tie back to that episode, which is all about the small business owner bit is, can we get people to smoke at a bar? And the payoff, or the architecture of it is, well, if we turn the bar into a play and we put people in the corner and we watch real life as if it's a play, we can justify smoking. And then real life proves not dramatic enough, so he goes and restages real life. It's like the Tom McCarthy novel Remainder if it was a comedy show, or like a Borges novel if it was a comedy show.
Yeah.
And so the Fielder method of these elaborate rehearsals and of trying to micromanage and recreate life, I think, comes from that episode. But that's also the episode where sitting there doing that exchange, people at the time compared him to Marina Abramovic. And people at the time laughed, sort of saying,
As a performance artist.
As a performance artist. But I mean, he is an artist. He meets, I think, there's no set condition for what an artist does, but an artist engages with their medium and I think critiques and deconstructs it. An artist engages with the culture around them, whether that's sociologically, politically, and he's a very political comedian. You don't have to peel too far back to see that.
No.
But an artist also exposes themselves. And that idea about sincerity with Nathan is interesting because it's so mediated, it's so controlled. There's so much literal and figurative architecture and so much of a desire to see him as the worst kind of artist, which is a kind of hipster, micromanaging guy. And I think that he resembles that a lot. But there is so much self-revelation and not just like literal exposure and humiliation. Like he, I think, dramatizes the process of being an artist about as well as anybody who I think is working now. And the fact that he does it by seemingly wasting, it's not a waste, it's incredibly well used, but wasting so much of HBO's money and by extension Warner Brothers' money and David Zaslav's money makes him a hero. He should be on Currency, I think, for that.
Every episode of The Rehearsal, I think, who greenlit the budget for this? I don't understand who the people are, because it gets more and more expensive.
Like if you watch Game of Thrones and you see dragons, I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
He rebuilds a bar and I go, this is how the pyramids were built. Like I can't believe what human beings are capable of doing because it's such a tangible, physical kind of craft.
Well,
and it boggles people's minds.
It's also the way it's deployed, Angelo, because in the first episode of this season, they maybe spend 25 seconds showing you how he rebuilt this one airport in Texas, and you are flabbergasted as you kind of watch the rebuilding of the airport terminal that you just seen get entirely recreated. I want to talk about this season 2 of The Rehearsal, because if we talk about him using social discomfort and connection as the raw material of his work, he's asking a central question, which is, can I direct all of this towards a serious issue, which is airplane crashes? Take a listen to this.
I've been studying commercial aviation disasters as a hobby, and I started to notice a disturbing pattern in the causes of these crashes. 15 years ago, you recommended role-playing exercises. The FAA
Said no. For whatever reason, they're just not going there.
I do have some experience with creating elaborate role-playing scenarios, and I do have money to put towards this.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there.
HBO's money, baby. HBO's money. Angelo, what leads Nathan Fielder to make this season about aviation safety?
I think what drives him there, if you believe him when he tells the airport employee that in the premiere that, you know, his approach is going to be somewhat sincere, I think that's the way he phrases it, is that for him, as you said before, right, personal dynamics are at the root of everything. So why wouldn't they also be at the root of airplane crashes? And he comes to this thesis from compiling all of this black box analysis of plane crashes that a number of those plane crashes happened because there was some sort of schism in the cockpit between a co-pilot and a pilot. The co-pilot notices some kind of pilot error, and because of social awkwardness or some kind of failing of social nicety, fails to act on it or fails to kind of supersede the natural order of things and seize control of the aircraft and, you know, intervene, right? And that, of course, sort of strikes Nathan Fielder, who is himself someone who struggles with social circumstances, or at least the character of Nathan in the show does that, as being an opportunity to really think about dynamics, right? Dynamics between people. In this case, dynamics within the cockpit. All the possible permutations that can go on between two people. Gender dynamics, class dynamics, dynamics of authority. All that stuff fascinates him because it's the stuff that Nathan, the character, and possibly Nathan, the creator of the show, struggles with, right? And in typical Nathan Fielder fashion, the unknowability of those mechanics and the dynamics in the air drives him to overcompensate. He's got to master everything. He's got to hire actors to play the pilots and co-pilots and to shadow them and master the Fielder method that he introduces in the previous season so that they can make a proper replica of the airport down to the Panda Express that this pilot that they hired off of Fiverr, or I forget where he gets him, goes to every day before his flight. He really has to make it real. He has to recreate the biography of Captain Sully Sullenberger in order to understand how those social dynamics worked for him and why he was able to make a course correction and communicate, right? It's kind of absurd when you lay it out that way, but it's also rooted in something human and real, I think.
Angela, I can imagine somebody listening to this conversation saying, what are you talking about? And by that, I mean, what we have just told them is that there's an HBO show that's led by a Canadian comedian who's a bit of an absurdist, and he likes to play with human connection, and he likes to recreate elaborate sort of rehearsals of situations and recreate literal airports, you know, in a studio in order to play out human interactions. And he's trying to direct all of that to the very serious issue of aviation safety. So, which actually, while it sounds nuts, I think he's actually pulling out something incredibly genius. But just real quickly here, does it feel flippant to you to be talking about airplane crashes in a comedy series, Angelo?
It's flippant enough that he needs to explain it, right? When he's trying to get people on board with the project, when he needs to sort of articulate that somewhat sincerity of the project. Certainly, I think he knows that it's potentially flippant. He knows that he has a credibility deficit, as I think he puts it in that first episode, right? Where a comedian is probably not going to be taken seriously about this. At the same time, it is funny, right, that he's pursuing this. Certainly the image of him appearing with his laptop holster outside of the cockpit of these simulations.
Watching intensely, yeah.
Watching tensely, that is funny. The idea of wasting the HBO money on it in order to create these mass replicas, that's funny. Those things are funny. Whether it's flippant or it's sincere, or it's something in between, I think is kind of an unresolved question of the season. But I'm sort of willing to give him some credit because, to me, I think the examination of the human relationships is pretty sincere, even if a lot of the framing is often quite arch and elaborate.
I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this show is called Commotion. Amil Niazi is here, and Adam Nayman is here, and Angelo Muredda is here, and we're talking about season 2 of The Rehearsal. Amil, the second episode of this season does something quite extraordinary, which is that he goes back and mines his past work. Nathan Fielder goes back and mines his past work as a Canadian Idol junior producer, and he does this kind of in the context of getting a whole bunch of co-pilots and realizing they have a hard time making somebody else uncomfortable, and so they're going to have to let down a whole bunch of people by creating this sort of fictitious singing competition and has these co-pilots have just turned down as many people as possible. Walk me a little bit through this. How did it feel to see like a resurrection of Canadian Idol, out of all things, in the context of, again, flight safety?
I mean, I thought it was amazing. First of all, I didn't know that about him, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
He is a master of this genre. He has such now we know, insiders knowledge of how best to make people kind of reveal who they are in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly that is what these reality singing shows do remarkably well, is like people come and, you think they're just going to sing a little song, and then they ultimately bare their soul, and then we judge them for the rest of time.
Mm-hmm.
And, to see him talk about what he learned or what he didn't learn and how he was going to mine that with the pilots, I thought was like such a great device. And then, of course, to see that ultimately it really was about him and his own discomfort with the way people perceive him and his inability to still come across likable and sincere when he's trying to deliver good or bad news was just so funny to me. And so he is sort of having these people come in and sing their songs, and the co-pilots are supposed to deliver bad news, but still, maintain a sort of air of likability and collegiality, because they're going to recreate this in the cockpit. But then, so they're judging the singers, but then the singers are rating the judges on how they perceive them. And one woman gets incredible ratings.
Mara
Just
D.
love her.
Yes.
Mara D. And she was great. Fantastic, I should say.
She was.
And then, Nathan is so impressed with her ratings that he tries it for himself, because of course he was in that chair, and, could he improve upon how he was perceived back then? And of course it's Nathan. So he gets like 2s and 4s, and you get this great moment where he disagrees with you played the clip off the top. He disagrees with one of the people's judgments on how you can't really change your aura, and therefore Nathan can't really change whether he's likable or not. And to tie it all to Canadian Idol is just like chef's kiss.
I mean, there is something at the core of this, Adam, but the idea that, if you are feeling disconnected from people around you, and if all you're seeking is connection with other people, and you're having a hard time saying, hey, there's a thing I need to say to you, and I don't know how to say it to you and still get you to like me. This is the stuff that Nathan is trying to play with. It's the undercurrent of the entire season. Yes, the aviation safety is like, that's a real issue that arises from this, but also it could just damage a lot of relationships, including business relationships, I should say. Like, one of the through lines of this season is Nathan has a bit of a hard time saying to his bosses at Paramount, hey, I really disagree with the decision that you're making. Do you want to explain that? Because that is also one of the genius, I think, turns of this season.
Paramount Plus had a bad morning last week, where they were under fire on the one hand from 60 Minutes and on the other from Nathan Fielder.
Yeah.
He talks about how an episode of Nathan For You, the classic it was alluded to earlier, Summit Ice, where he found out, it takes so long to explain, the short version, he found out that a clothing manufacturer was actually including Holocaust denial in their publicity materials, not fabricated as a comedy stunt, a real thing. So he responded to it with an equally real thing, which was he decided to donate the proceeds from his own line of bespoke winter wear, Summit Ice, to a Vancouver Holocaust Museum.
That he actually launched.
Which he actually launched and was taken up by a lot of prominent Hollywood celebrities, especially a lot of Hollywood Jewish entertainers.
Yeah.
And then he found the episode had been removed from Paramount Plus because of, quote, sensitivities around Jewish content, which is something that he leaves as a euphemism on the show, because what it's euphemizing is something that most comedians won't touch.
Right.
Even very left-leaning comedians now. Pertaining to the larger, global political situation.
Yeah.
So he decides to burrow in his typical kind of, solipsistic way, but not flippantly solipsistic. I think sincerely, like, how do you get mad at them for pulling this? And the pettiness that comes out is basically comparing Paramount Plus, not allegorically or metaphorically, but directly to Nazi Germany, and creating their headquarters in a parody of the sort of scene you'd see in Raiders of the Lost Ark or Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah.
But he ends up dredging up, because again, he's very smart about how he does it. Narcissism expands into a real question about censorship, and expression, and how are we, how if we try and express ourselves about an issue sincerely, and then that episode gets taken away, who's that on? And can he be more confrontational about it or less confrontational? And of course, the actor enlisted to play the paramount head, who has this German accent, stops halfway and starts saying, "What you're doing is ridiculous."
Right.
And actually, what you're doing is flippant and somewhat
'Cause it's a TV
inappropriate
show.
because it's a TV show.
Yeah.
So he keeps all those things kind of in play.
Yeah.
So there is media critique. And I think that it's as a media critic, both of the way that, corporations function, but also the way that his own medium functions. That's the through line in his work that I think matters the most. He is ambivalent about his own medium and about that's why the Canadian Idol is the primal scene of what he does is so interesting, because it's very self-critical. It's like Canadian Idol made him this way.
Right.
And that's why he's dealing with it this way.
I got to ask you, Angelo, one of the things that really stand out is like the way that he does end up involving actors sometimes, but also quite a bit of real people. And that they end up being, those involvements end up being quite revelatory. I want you to take a listen to the scene from the rehearsal where he's talking to a pilot. You're going to hear the voice of the pilot first.
I mean, especially being a male captain and a female first officer, you always have to also kind of, walk on eggshells or whatever, if you will, because because something you may think is a joke and try to be funny, you might get offended by, right?
Sure, yeah.
So, I've been doing this for a long time. I feel like I'm not a psychologist, but I feel like I know how to read the room pretty well.
Doing what for a long time?
Just, flying, not only flying, but
yeah.
also just like interacting with people. I'm being single. I've been banned from pretty much every dating app known to man. They kick you off.
For what?
They don't give you reasons. So like, I've been banned from Tinder, Hinge, Bumble.
He goes on to reveal he's been banned from Instagram as well, and he tried to sign up with his mom's account. Angelo, talk to me about the way that Nathan Fielder uses real people in his comedy.
At times at his meanest, I think he sort of takes a similar approach to Louis Theroux in his BBC documentaries, where he gives someone enough space to kind of reveal themselves, and then, of course, naturally they will do that, sort of like what Amil was saying earlier. That's happened already a few times, like Jeff the pilot here is a great example of that. In the first season, there's, I think his name is Robin, the numerology-obsessed guy who keeps crashing his car, who just loves talking, and Nathan loves him talking.
Yeah.
Like, put a camera on them, deadpan, say why, and then see what happens. Almost like he's a human anthropologist studying different social types and looking at different exhibits of the human species. Underneath that, though, I think at times there's a warmth in the way that he approaches real people as this mystery that the Nathan character is trying to understand. And I think there is a real sincerity to that. Whether he's trying to emulate them, whether he's trying to follow something of their example, sometimes that's, bordering on satirical. I think that's true in the case of Sully, right? Where he wants to understand how this famous captain, this hero, as Adam said, who landed the plane in the Hudson successfully because he was able to communicate at the right moment. The path he goes on there is obviously satirical, is obviously extreme, but in other cases, I think, like with Muredda in the second episode, there's a real kind of warmth in the way that he depicts the Nathan character trying to understand how she is so skilled at relating to people, delivering bad news, managing emotions, managing big personalities, although, as we see later in the episode, even she struggles with Jeff the pilot once they end up in the cockpit. There's something genuine there, right? He's really marveling at the singularity of people, how some people just naturally have the social intelligence and some people don't, and maybe we can learn it and maybe we can't.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there for just a moment and just say that if folks are just joining us, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. The show is called Commotion, and we're about to run out of time on the radio. We're going to keep this conversation going on the podcast. We're going to keep this conversation going on the YouTube stream as well. So hang around if you're there, and if you're listening on the radio, please find the longer version of this conversation there. Adam Nayman is here, and Angelo Muredda is here, and Amil Niazi is here, and we're talking about the rehearsal. We're talking about the thing that Nathan Fielder does that sets him apart from all other comedians who are working right now. And what sets him apart, honestly, is so much, because his raw material is the sincerity of people and the way that they work. But what he ends up arriving at is something that I want to get to, because this last episode of the rehearsal, I needed a minute to reflect on where my life has led me to be watching this episode of television. So we're going to get to that in just a moment. But I also want you to know that tomorrow on the show, we're going to be talking about the Met Gala, and the theme this year is Black Dandyism. I'm very excited about that conversation. So please, if you're listening on the radio, don't go anywhere. Come back tomorrow. Commotion's going to be here at the same time. If you're on YouTube, on podcast, this conversation's going to keep going. The radio folks, we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, Amil, I want to pick up exactly where Angelo left us there, because there is something about the ways that he's using real people to sort of like reveal these things about sincerity and the way the sincerity works, and he is able to maintain this deadpan thing and then just hand people more and more space to be more and more themselves. And at the same time, he's trying to figure out, like, how do I be myself in a context like this one? So he delivers his gut-wrenching line in the season about sincerity. He says, quote, "I've always felt that sincerity is overrated. It just ends up punishing those who can't perform it as well as others," which is a heartbreaking line. What do you think he means by that?
Well, first of all, I think when he's talking to Jeff, the pilot who says he's been banned from every dating app known to man, I think those are some of the moments where we get closest to who Nathan sincerely is. And those are the moments when you see him almost break. Like, he almost never breaks whatever character you think he's playing.
Yeah.
But there's this hit. He had it with Angela in season 1, the real Angela, where he just like, you could tell he was working so hard not to react to the crazy things she was saying. And you can see him working so hard not to react to the things Jeff is saying. And there's a moment when he talks about why he was banned in this latest episode. And I swear I thought Nathan was going to crack and just start laughing.
I was screaming on my television. I genuinely was like screaming on my television as I was unfolding.
Just like everything he had to stay stone faced. But that just sort of tells you how many layers to this like so-called sincerity are at play. Like, either you think it's sincere of him to be listening empathetically to this guy talk and not judging him and not reacting, or you believe that the person who is so badly judging but trying not to is the sincere one. And I think that all of that is kind of like what he's grappling with. And I like to think, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that the person he learned to be on Canadian Idol, the judgmental sort of like arm's length, sort of like wry version of himself that he's built up throughout his career, is the person that he's trying to overcome, is the person that he's trying to better. And that's what he's talking about when he says, some people are better at emulating it or basically like faking it. But I think what he encounters with someone like Mara D is that she's not faking it, and that actually it sort of reveals in so many different ways that ultimately, we see how insincere Nathan is in those moments, because someone like Mara isn't faking it. And you clearly, as our wonderful Canadian Idol has been said, like, you can't change your aura, you can't change your vibe, you can't change your energy. Like, he's basically just telling Nathan, like, dude, you're kind of a bad person, and it's very obvious when I'm in the room with you. And you can't fake it. And so I think all of that is at play. And I know we're going to get to it in a minute, but I think that his willingness to show what his all of his sides, his bad sides as well, is why I think I don't think that he's ultimately out to humiliate those people. It's really about humiliating himself.
Yeah.
And why I don't feel bad watching the show. But we can get to that in a minute, I'm sure.
It's certainly like it's not a neutral show about sincerity. I don't think it's a show that, I think it's a show that's sort of trying to work through some of these larger questions. But then you get to an episode like the last one, episode 3 of the Rehearsal season 2, which is, we've mentioned Sully. Sully is I don't remember Sully's last name, but he's the captain.
Sullenberger.
Thank you, Sully Sullenberger, the captain who landed the plane in the Hudson, and Nathan uncovers in the transcript, the fact that like all those lives were saved. He uncovers in the transcript, this moment where Sully consulted his co-captain on just what he should do, and he was like, "Whoa, there's something happening here. What about Sully?" Here's the question: what about Sully made him do that? And then what lengths does he go to try to answer that question, Adam?
I think the question of why Sully is because he's an iconic character associated with history of aviation and particularly aviation safety. I mean,
Tom Hanks plays him in the
Tom
movie.
Hanks plays
Sully.
him in a movie. He makes perfect sense as a kind of guardian angel for that aspect of the series. We're a figure to project onto.
Yeah.
So what Nathan does is, in reading his autobiography, taking Sully's own words, he sees this psychological portrait of someone who's quite reticent and who compartmentalizes and copes. He sees something of himself in that, I think, whether that's really Nathan Fielder, the showrunner and the producer, saying, compartmentalization, that's a great theme, or Nathan, the character, going, I also have trouble sometimes expressing myself. Also, I like listening to music, which he finds is one of Sully's things he refers to over and over, this very early 21st century iPod fixation, which is such a Proustian Madeline thing for people our age, where it's like, yes, our iPod looked like that too.
They sure did.
But I mean, the thing that he does is he goes and applies the Fielder method to growing up as Sully. And because he's at the control of the shows, it's quite ambivalent. It's quite ambiguous as to whether, he really did this at great length or just filmed what he needed. But all these forced perspective sets with these actors on giant stilts.
He plays a baby.
Actors in giant stilts in costumes.
Lead,
relating to him as parents while he is a bald, shaved, emasculated baby, which is
baby Sully,
which is beyond flippant, but also deeply serious. If you think, and I don't know what you guys think of this, I think the big theme of both seasons of Rehearsal is parenting and family. Nathan's baby Bjorn is the most resonant thing I've ever seen about how we conflate responsibilities between micromanaging parts of life and technology and then sort of parenting. Every time he has this baby Bjorn with his laptop attached, I think of all the parents, myself included, who are on their phones at the park.
Yeah.
And so much of that first season of The Rehearsal is about this desire to parent, to be a dad, to role play being a dad. The last episode, which is deeply moving, it's one of the Rehearsal episodes that made me cry. The pretend daddy one about this weird attachment with the child actor. So in season 2, putting himself in the role of the baby is a sight gag and perverse and bizarre. It's going to awaken things in people that they did not know were there, I think. Already people on social media were like, this is a thing. Yeah. But it's also so powerful in the idea of trying to go back to the primal scene of nature and nurture, which he makes explicit. Because one thing he is not is subtle. Yeah. He will always tell you what the work is about. So he has that conversation here about nature versus nurture. And the fact that we're talking about this episode of TV that literally involves cloned dogs, like actual cloned dogs
10 minutes
being taught,
on cloned dogs off the top of the episode.
Being taught behavior, and it's not what we're talking about, speaks to the great thing about his comic strategy, which is you can never figure out how he's going to get from point A to point B. Yeah. And you could not predict point B in most of these episodes with a gun to your head. How he gets from one place to another is ingenious.
You certainly couldn't predict that point C would be Evanescence, Angelo. Angelo, reaction to that episode, episode 3 of season 2.
Just in terms of what happens, as Adam was saying, right, we start off with this painstaking recreation of the old home of a clone dog. And by the end, he's living the life of Sully Sullenberg and hypothesizing that the miracle on the Hudson happened because Sully was listening to the 23-second chorus of the Evanescence song, Bring Me to Life. I think that's such a representative example of the way that Nathan Fielder incorporates these incredibly strange particular details and uses them as a way of kind of hopping across these points on a map, as Adam was saying, and going from point A to point B. He loves this kind of meshing of the big and the small, the controlled and the uncontrolled, and that tension is really funny, and sometimes it's quite touching and relatable, I think. On the one hand, he's this maximalist who's interested in addressing these really big picture issues, air safety, human relationships, cloning in this one, although how seriously he's invested in that, I guess we'll find out later, through these painstaking recreations, right? Recreations of real places, whether it's the airport or the Canadian Idol audition rooms or the pet's home. On the other hand, he's a minimalist, right? He really wants to get the details right. He wants to get the specific air that the cloned dog that the original of the cloned dog breathed in San Jose, that he brings in via a van all the way to Los Angeles and has a person sort of piping out to the dog on his walk. Right? These are absurd details to keep track of and obsess over. At the same time as he's doing all of that, he's also a documentarian, right? And he's open to new things that are coming up as he's going along, and he's interviewing real people. And there's something about that balancing of all of these strange tensions, I think, that's really human and poignant and interesting on this show.
Amil, last word to you. It's not a surprise to me that episode 3 has caused all the social media conversation. What are the things that you're seeing that are sticking out for you? Are people connecting with the emotional parts of this episode, or is it kind of like, oh man, this is Nathan at his most absurdist?
I mean, I think it's always like the long tail with him, right? Like the immediate reaction, of course, is like I'm seeing memes of like baby powder and an iPod of just like, you don't need to know anything else but about these two things as your takeaway from the episode. And so people are just reacting to the absurdity. There's like lots of photos of him as a baby in the crib or drinking his mommy's milkies. That scene really was something else because I was watching it with my baby and I'm just like, oh, okay, I hope he doesn't turn around and see this because it's going to be one for the therapy books. So I think right now people are just seeing kind of like how far he's willing to go and reacting to that. But I think like as Adam and Angelo were sort of mentioning, it's like once you've sat with the absurdity, once you've like let it absorb just like what he's willing to do and the strange places he's willing to go, then you can actually sit and think about like, what is he really trying to say and what's he really getting at and what is this ultimately all about? And I do think that again, he's not subtle, like this issue of parenting and our relationships to our own childhoods, dare I say the word trauma, and how trauma impacts your relationships and how it changes who you are as a person. That has repeatedly come up. It comes up in pretty, I mean, you see it with they don't mention it right away, but eventually you get to the couple with the clone dogs and how she wanted to have a baby and he didn't feel ready. And so they got these dogs and now here they are with, all this money poured into these dogs and they're still not truly satisfied. And what does that say? And here's Nathan never truly satisfied with like who he is as a person and where did that all start? So I think, I'll tell you what I am now suddenly, and the New Yorker talked about this, Richard Brody mentioned like now the episode or this episode really seems to have set this season in motion. And now we're kind of like ready for where he's going. And I can't wait based on this last episode to see where this is all going, because you might have expected it to go one place off the top. And now I just like feel like we're going to end up somewhere so scary. There's no way I'm prepared for it.
I'm certainly not prepared for it. Adam, you wanted to add something before we go?
Well, yeah, what you're saying about that, going back to Sincerity, there's that moment in the second episode where he sees what this person thinks of him, and he pulls the piece of paper out of the box, and he sees that she's given him a 6, and he turns it over to see it as a 9. Yeah. And the two things that you think are that if we were to know what people think of us privately, we would want to see it. We would then literally and figuratively turn it over in our head until it lined up with how we thought about ourselves. And the fact that a 6 and a 9, the constant turning over, I mean, that to me is his subject. He's also in control of the camera.
Right.
And the idea that so much of what's interesting about Sincerity and Flippancy comes down to the editing room. Yeah. So when you watch that episode at the end, he becomes quite a tragic figure. You were tied into the idea that he needs validation from this failed reality show contestant, and it's going to sit with him whether she thinks he's a 6 or a 9. Either way, he's improved. Maybe he hasn't lived up to his model of himself. But then you have to come back into it and be like, as Angelo was saying, not just a documentarian, he's a filmmaker. And as a filmmaker, there's a ruthlessness there. Yeah. Even when it's a ruthlessness in the service of creating an idea of sincerity. I don't totally trust Nathan, even though I think he's brilliant. Yeah. And that lack of trust is where that tension sort of comes. Like Amil was saying, I want to think that he's on the level. I also kind of don't.
He's explicitly, I think, telling you to not trust him. I mean, like all of these constructs going into this are saying, I'm in charge here. I will find it in the edit, even if it's not there in real life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I should say, like, we've had this entire conversation about like how cerebral and how subversive all of these things is. It is unbelievably funny. Like, I think like the pace of humor of the show that doesn't necessarily come through in this conversation because there's so many different ideas to bite at. But the pace of laughter is not like a laugh, every 10 minutes. Like, you are laughing constantly, basically every other shot. And I think that's the thing that makes Nathan Fielder just kind of like on another planet when it comes to comedy at the moment. I gotta say thank you to all of you. We have 3 more seasons, three more episodes of this season of The Rehearsal. God help us all, because I have no idea where this is going. But in the meantime, Angelo and Amil and Adam, all 3 A's. Look at you. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Adam Nayman is a film and TV critic. You'll be able to read more of his thoughts on The Rehearsal in The Walrus in the coming weeks. Amil Niazi is a writer at The Cut, and Angelo Muredda is a freelance film critic in Toronto. You can catch The Rehearsal on Crave. That is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We will be back tomorrow, and I will be delighted to see you then. We're going to talk about the Met Gala. It'll be a great time. See ya.